Final presenter of the morning is Glenn Fawcett. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you, Moira. I'm here this morning and I'm going to have a quick chat about embedding an asset management system. Now, I think Ian will be excited about this because it's not only talking about the process, but it's a 5-step process. But contain your excitement, you're doing a pretty good job. Contain your excitement because I want to start with a quote, and that is that the power of technology can be awe-inspiring, but it only truly becomes life-changing once people are using it. Now, interestingly enough, that's a slogan by Motorola Corporation. They invented the world's first mobile phone in April 1973. It took another 20 to 30 years before it was being used by the masses. Now, it's relevant to my talk today because I'm not talking about a new technology. Asset management systems have been out for a long time. What I'm talking about is a process we can follow to get them used. Now, just to make sure we're all on the same page, because asset management itself always conjures up different views. So I want to pose a simple question, and that is, what the hell is an asset management system? We've heard already today about IIM. It defines asset management as a strategic approach to the process of maintaining, upgrading, and operating physical assets. So really, in simple terms, effective asset management is about optimizing the maintenance and operation of assets that we already have within a constrained OpEx environment. To achieve this, therefore, an asset management system provides systematic processes and practices and tools and data around maintaining the asset register, and we've heard some stuff about that, work order management, service requests or incidents, materials, procurements, and the likes. Now, this will all be a little clearer as we move through. So the 5-step process. Step 1, determine the business drivers and unmet needs. Now, I want to introduce here the concept of a deep dive workshop, where we gather together a range of people from across the client organisation. As MWH, we bring a whole lot of prepared open-ended questions, much like a quick start. We use those questions to seed discussion. And we run the discussion and we dig down until we hear issues, problems, concerns on the client side. Now, there's a lot of chat in these workshops. There's a lot of listening. We typically have 2 or 3 people frantically recording what they hear. These become what we would term the unmet needs. For example, we may hear that there are too many points of contact for managing complaints. This is an unmet need. We would have asked, well, why is this a problem for you? And we keep drilling down and digging down until we understand the root cause of the issue. That becomes the platform, the why. Start with the why. We then get into the second phase of the process, which is to map out the roles and business process improvement areas. Once again, MWH have done this around the world. We have actually now, as a starting point, high-level business process for a typical utility. And depending on the scope of our engagement, we would drill down 1 or possibly even 2 levels to get to the swim lane process maps of an organisation. Now, we bring that content as a starting point and then we modify it for each different utility and each different client environment. What we would typically do is map out both the current state or the as-is process and the desired state or the to-be process. So by this stage in the implementation, we've established the unmet needs, what it is that we're trying to fix. We know what a successful process should look like. Now, the third phase is to begin the implementation. And it's this slide that I want you to absorb. Take a moment and take it in. Probably long enough. It's a 10-minute presentation. What we've found is that to be successful, the client needs to appreciate that these are not IT projects. These are change management projects. To be successful, we've found that the budget needs to be spread across 4 key elements. And that as much, if not more energy, should be spent on changing the process, practices, and the people side of the business as on the tools and information. So let's have a quick look what process practice improvements we might implement. We heard during the deep dive that the client didn't have consistent work practices across their organisation. Again, as MWH, we do this stuff. We've got the Bywater, the treatment guys. We've got a lot of standard maintenance job plans out there and schedules. We bring those and adapt them to a client organisation. Under the people and organisations side, we may have heard that the way the client responds to incidents is quite fragmented. The solution may be to centralise that and create an operations centre, as was the case in Brunei. We then may need to raise the public awareness, a toll-free number, advertising. Those are all part of the change management side. On the tools and technology, what we typically hear is that information is not readily available enough. Yet web browsers are ubiquitous in any organisation. So what we can now do is make information available from the GIS, from the corporate information systems, at the desktop through a web browser. Now I'm going to show you just quickly some of the stuff that Brunei client now has available. So you see here a dashboard showing the last couple of weeks of incidents. The user can drill down into any connection problem, for example, have a look at the history of that incident, have a look at where that incident occurred, and obviously over time that becomes a very useful data set. We can also go to a facility, have a look at a pump, and have a look at the work history on that pump. This is all work management. We can also find a facility easily through the map or through the unique IDs in the asset register. We can retrieve as-built plans. Again, this is at the desktop, very much a Google look and feel. Along the Google, we can also, and have in Brunei, captured 360 panoramics every 10 metres along the road. But what's cool is that we can now overlay the GIS information into that 360 panoramic, providing a very intuitive way to query the asset information. Technology now makes all of this actually easily available. The 360 panoramic also allows us to pick up assets directly at the desktop without going in the field. Now, due to time constraints, I'm only going to touch briefly on phase 4 and 5. The rollout and refinement is the 4th stage. And another quote, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." Proposed by a Frenchman, but nevertheless. It's a great slogan for rolling out a system. Okay, because these asset management systems are so complex, they're so configurable, and they impact so many parts of our client organisation that you can't get them perfect to roll out, and nor should you try. A more sensible approach is to stage your go live for each process improvement area, to establish a sandpit, a test environment that you can work with the end users to play with the system. During that playtime, you would find refinements and you'd be responsive to those refinements. And finally, the make it stick phase. I'm going to sum this phase up with a Brunei statistic. That project, we had a 3-year implementation phase for the systems, data collection, setting up and establishing servers, etc. We then had a 2-year post-project support embedment phase. The level of resourcing we had in that 2-year embedment phase was only 20% less than the implementation team. Without that level of effort, and it's actually now stretched out to 3 years, without that effort, the system would not have stuck. People would have chose not to use it. We have the early adopters, that middle section of the bell curve, we had to get them on board in that 2 to 3 year period. That is absolutely critical to make these systems work. So that's our 5-step process. The takeaways, firstly, MWH has a whole lot of content, and we're seeing a lot of it today actually, under each step in the process. The unmet needs, the process maps, the asset registers. The second takeaway is that it's not an IT project, it's a project in change management. As a consultancy, we put as much effort, if not more, into changing the process, practices and people as we do in the tools and technology. As engineers, we know the assets. We know the client organisations. That makes us a whole lot better place in the IT industry, who historically have implemented these work management, asset management systems. So we do it better. There was a third one, but without too much on my slides, I can't remember what it was. So we'll wrap it up there. I'll take questions, please.
Great job. Questions for Glenn?
Jane Campbell. You're right, that was brilliant. What I was going to say was, I totally agree with you. This kind of embedding period after is just so important, and actually having enough staff on the job to do that. But how did you convince your client that actually that was a really valuable time for them to go forward? Because I think a lot of clients will have the mindset of, well, if it's the right tools and they're good enough, once you've done them, you should be able to leave us with them. So was that difficult to convince the client about that, or?
We price these jobs under a lump sum environment. We were actually quite involved in that whole development, pricing, setting the budget, and winning the work. So we worked with the client. They understood, and they had seen so many systems fail in the past, especially in the Asia environment, because external consultants come in, implement, and leave. That support sits in Singapore, it sits in Australia, it sits in the US. So they were well aware, and when we present like this, the heads start nodding, they understand. So it wasn't hard, but we did have to get into this is where we do compete, and the jobs we say no go to are the jobs where the client has set a budget and they'll put it out to competitive tender and everyone's trying to get in and get out. So for this one, we worked with the client, they understood, they set the right budget. We would walk away from a job where we didn't have the post-project support because it's actually so destined to fail, in my mind.
Back in that corner.
Hi, Dan Keeney, Broomfield. Have you been able to see themes or profiles of the clients then that you can target that we could take this service offering solution to?
Yeah, I think, look, Brunei itself was a reasonably greenfield environment, but with the deep dive kind of establishing the why, the issues at the start, we adapted our solution to that environment. So picking up our solution, our end solution, and taking it to a client in New Zealand or the US wouldn't be appropriate. But there's aspects of it that would be. And I think definitely the Ashgal job, the Middle East clients where you have the real need with a lot of infrastructure development going on, the mega city kind of funding. So I think the other potential client, the good clients we should be looking at is funding agencies. And so both in the IFI, World Bank and those sectors, but also in private equity, because I think they're going to be needing these sorts of systems in order to take on a bigger role in managing infrastructure.
Hi Glenn, it's John Perry again. You mentioned the Ashgal project in particular. In Brunei, you must have faced some significant challenges with the Arabic language translation and the Islamic culture, which is obviously linked to what we're doing in Ashgal. How did you overcome those, and what were the main issues that you faced?
So it's a very good point, and it is very transportable, that part of the project. One of the things we had on our team is probably half of our team was local Brunei. We were able to train them during our 3-year implementation phase and then put them out in the client organisation for the 3-year embedment phase. So running a classroom training session, complete waste of time. On-job training is the only effective way. If I'm sitting there asking feedback, there's a cultural gap, they won't give it to me. If one of my staff's in there, they'll give them all the feedback about me that I need, and then it comes back through that channel. So there's a whole lot of cultural things that we learn in Brunei, and we haven't just done these projects, we've been in Cambodia and other Asian areas. I think the Middle East is very similar with those sorts of issues. But yeah, a level of on-job training, train the trainer, get the locals on our team, because there's a commercial driver, and then put them out into the client organisation.
All right, great. Thank you very much,
Lunchtime.
Glenn.